I knew that if I asked you to remind me, that it would help me stay on track. There, I've got it on top of my screen too. But what you gonna do? To start with, I'm really tickled with the way you guys are doing in this course. I feel I was a little bit concerned at the start because of the sisters and maybe the challenges that they would have in comprehending. And as you've learned already, finance is complex. It is very complex. And so therefore, I was a little bit concerned, but the one thing I rested upon is I knew that you were probably good students. And therefore, you've proven that, and everybody's doing quite well. Hi, Steve. How are we doing?
Good evening, everyone. I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. And so I'm very pleased with the progress. What kind of let's hear comments you have. And I'm going to go kind of around the room and well, there's a room. I'll go around the Zoom. That's like a room and ask you to just give me a little bit of reaction so far. And Carissa, why don't you start us off?
Sure. I'm not afraid to say that I still feel like I don't know how I'm doing well because I still feel lost. I feel like the budgeting and everything is just the economics of school finance is just a big topic, and it's something that I've never had any wherewithal about. So this is it can be like it can be a little bit confusing and intimidating even still now, even though I'm looking through everything. So I'm just trying to keep on top of it.
And I first of all, it is complex. And so, don't feel bad about feeling confused at times and things like that. What I try to do is I try to take a very complex topic and make it as simple as possible. And so we'll continue to do that. What I've learned over the years is that starting about this time, the concepts start to fall together. They start to kind of make a little bit better sense. So, yes, go ahead, Fatima.
You want me to say my part?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So what I've been gaining from this, I feel like so I kind of like I got an understanding of how like each districts get paid differently and how everything is funded. So I like that I'm learning. Like I was just new to this. And actually like even today I was telling my sister, she's like, how come this place gets so much care? And I'm like, because this district gets fun more than other districts, which
Exactly.
and now I feel like I'm using it in my day-to-day life.
Larger, it probably has more students, and so
Yeah,
therefore it's probably going to get more money because
yeah,
students is one of those variables that impact the funding that you receive. Sister
yeah.
Pham, what do you say?
I just say that I am still learning, and every lesson I get a new knowledge, and I have to make that familiar with the thing that I am learning, and I already look through the final project.
Yes.
And some parts of the final project, I just look at it, but sometimes I feel that overwhelmed. But I still work. Yeah.
And that's another very common feeling. You feel overwhelmed. I'm going to walk through that budget uh, project tonight so you can kind of see uh, where I'm going with that. And we'll talk a little bit about, budgeting to say, and we're not there yet as far as the module is concerned, but we'll get there. Okay. Uh, so how about the connections between Vietnam funding schools and US funding schools? You've seen some things that are common, haven't you?
Um, I saw some in comments about some kind of private school or public school, but about the funding in my country depend a lot of the government, the government and
Yes. one of the things that the other students might be surprised in their international schools in Vietnam, they allow personal investors to invest in the school, which is a concept that I had not, that's foreign to me. And so it's kind of interesting to learn that. Sister Anna, what say you about this course so far?
So far I feel surprised and overwhelmed some course because some information because I didn't think that it's so complex in the finance in the school budget. Because I have never talked, listen about that or read about that, so I didn't know it's so complex. I just think that we just receive the money and then just spend it for some.
Everything, we've received the
Yeah,
money and everything's fine and dandy.
yeah. But when learning about this, so I learned some good lesson that when we know how to manage the budgets, so it will we help our school develop and step by step we will know who is our stakeholders who we should work with and talk with, and they will help us to improve our school.
You know,
So it's a good way.
you said something very, very important there that I want to stress. In my evolution, I remember, well, I have to tell you, this is kind of a funny story. So I graduated from Xavier University, but my degree was as a counselor, and I did serve as a school counselor for a while. But I was always aiming toward school leadership. And so I registered and I started to take a few courses at Ohio State University. I had my undergraduate at Ohio State, and so I started taking continuing ed courses at Ohio State. So I signed up for a school finance class, and as students do, I talked to my friends and said, "Tell me, about this course from this particular professor." And they said, they shook their head and they said, "You're going to work your can off. And when you walk out there, you're not going to know a darn thing." I said, "That ain't good." That was the only class in my entire educational journey that I ever dropped. I then contacted my friend who took the class at Xavier University and asked him. I said, "What about your school finance class?" The guy was wonderful, he said. Now this is all in the face-to-face times. And he said, he breaks it down so it's understandable and provides you with the information that you truly need to comprehend school finance. I said, that's the person who I want to take this course from, because all along I always knew that the finances were important for a school. We can talk about instructional leadership, we can talk about curriculum development, all those kinds of things. But you don't have professional development if you don't have money. You don't have curriculum if you don't have money. And so that was one of the reasons that I always felt that way. Steve, you're in a whole different ball game here. What's your take on this course?
Yes, I wouldn't want anyone to think just because I have a little bit of experience or I'm older or anything like that, that I somehow know all this information. So, I mean, obviously I've had some exposure to it, some of it more directly than others, but have really tried sincerely to approach this as what are some new points that I can learn. In some cases, that's I think we all recognize sometimes you're doing things and you don't necessarily have you may have the practical knowledge, but you don't necessarily have the research or textbook knowledge about what that is and the backings behind it. So here, tying those things together has been helpful. I would also say that my experience has been entirely in the state of Michigan. So the examples that you've given, Dr. Bourne, in the textbook, and then the others, have really
Eye-opening, isn't it?
eye-opening. The one from this most recent module, of course, is that, in the state where the residents of the school district get to vote on the district's budget. I mean,
What? So when I started researching for this book, I read that, and it's Northeast states. And I'm going, you got to be kidding me. This is this is nuts. That's crazy. But that's the way they've done it forever, and that's the way they're going to continue to do it. The other thing that I was, I don't know if any of you are going to aspire to be in a role. I think Carissa is thinking about principalship. You don't know about the rest of you, but you need to hear this, okay? On average, and I'm going to say on average, when you are in a role such as that, you have people helping you to provide you support, to provide you information. In my case, when I was a principal, the superintendent was extraordinarily knowledgeable about school finance. And I learned I took the book learning that I had, and I watched his practical application of the resources that we were receiving and spending, and took away a lot from that. The other person that you lean on heavily, and as a superintendent, I leaned on this person heavily, and that was the school treasurer or the chief financial officer, whatever their term is. And once again, I found myself very fortunate because the individual who was in that role when I was a superintendent was very gifted, very knowledgeable, and was always looking down the road. And when I had questions, I felt comfortable in coming to her, and we talked them out. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you're not necessarily in this alone. Although sadly, the Catholic school principal tends to be a little more alone than a public school principal, because and sadly again, most diocese superintendents maybe aren't even knowledgeable about school finance themselves, and they were in a position, they got to the position for other reasons, and they just don't get much direction. And Steve, I see you're shaking your head, so I'm not saying anything. It's not just unique to Ohio, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, the other piece of that I would just add on is, just in terms of the not feeling alone. I mean, both in the public and the private settings, you might have a mentor as a new principal. Some medium to larger size districts, or even maybe a well-functioning Catholic office of Catholic schools, might have a formal mentorship process that might tie you with an experienced principal. Or you might just go back to find somebody that was in one of your classes at Madonna or somewhere else, and
Yes.
hook up with them, and that can be very valuable.
I've always extended this to both my school law students and my school finance students, although I don't think I said it last time when I taught school law at Madonna. I'm here. You got to, you're not in my class. You have a question, reach out to me. I don't know if I'll have an answer for you, but I will, consider the question. I'll do a little research if necessary, and we'll kind of take it from there. So, it's important to realize that really there is some support there, and in some cases more so than others. Okay, so one of the projects that you may choose to do, I'm going to spend some time talking about the upcoming projects, okay? So one of the projects that you may choose to do is the grant, okay? Now, you're not required to do it, but you may choose to do it. And, at this particular point, everybody's doing very good in the class, and so therefore, I don't know that it's necessary, but it is a bonus, 10 points, so realize that if you do that. And when I taught this in Ohio, the emphasis was, and I was teaching mostly public school students who were in public schools thinking about going into the principalship in a public school. And so therefore, there was a little less emphasis on budget development, as I've kind of mentioned before. So what I required them to do is they had to do an actual a grant. Now they could either do I told them you can either do a mock grant or a fake grant, but you had to have all the elements put together in this fake grant, or you could actually apply to a particular grant. And part of that, the reason behind that is sometimes you don't know when the grant is due. And something that you really want to apply for, oh gee, it's no longer, you can't apply for it, it's no longer available. And so therefore, I gave them lots of wiggle room on the project. Over the term, and I gave you some examples of their work that they turned in that you might have looked at. And one of the ones that I found interesting was and it was with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and they applied for it, got it. I think it was $500. It wasn't much. That wasn't the big deal. And it was taking his students on a fishing trip. That's what they basically did with that grant. The one that I remember the most, and this one just floored me, they got $30,000 for a wrestling mat. I couldn't believe it. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. It just astonished me. And so we had grants from here to there. Just for FYI, lots of places like Walmart, Lowe's, those two pop to mind. They support schools with grants that are classroom specific. And so if a teacher wants to have a little additional resources, that is something that's available. Of course, we'll be talking a little bit about the search for those grants. And quite honestly, oftentimes the search for the grant is as challenging as actually writing for the grant. Okay, another assignment you have coming up is the interview. And that's due on April 14th. And I'm suggesting that you talk to a principal, and we want you to talk about these specific kinds of things. We want you first to talk about the school budget process. And Carissa, this is very important for you. Talk to your principal about how she puts that budget together, okay? And you might also start probing her about the revenue sources. Of course, it's mostly all tuition, and those kinds of things, as well as the expense side as well, okay? And the other thing that we want you to talk about, and all of you, we want you to talk about with this person, is cost-saving strategies. Now, in chapter 1 of my second book, Reducing Expenses, School Expenses, I go into about 15 or 16 different cost-saving strategies. So you'll need to read that part of that chapter to flesh out those specific cost-saving strategies. And then all you need to do is just ask that person you're interviewing, do you do this? For example, one of the things that particularly larger schools can do is bulk purchasing, buying things in bulk. And the other thing I probably should say to you is, some of the things, even this budget activity, has some personal use to it as well. We all know that if we buy things in bulk, the price comes down. Well, the same thing is true for buying paper in bulk, something that you can buy in bulk. Cooperative purchasing, teaming with another school district or a consortia, can save major dollars. Anyway, so you'll just ask, does the school district participate in a consortium? They say no, you say, okay, fine. Okay. And you just go through the various list and, ask. And then at the end, I think you're writing something to say, are there aspects that school might use that would benefit them? There goes the cat. That was funny. So anyway, that's all you're doing. You're just asking those kind of questions. I think there's 2 questions along with that. That's project 2. So you're gathering the information with the interview, but you'll be reporting it in project 2. And all you do, once again, is just report in a table, yes, no, and maybe comments that you might have discussed with that individual. The chapter is already available to you, is available on the 31st of March in that, I can't remember if that's the 14th or 15th module. It's one of the 14th or 15th. And it's in the introduction. So if you go to that introduction, you click on, you should see chapter 1, reducing school expenses. Okay. So that's that. Okay. So now I want to get into the budget project, and I'm going to share something with you here. So, and Blackboard would not allow me to put this into the module. I don't know why. It says I have run out of space or something. So I put it as an announcement, and it's there in the announcements. So this is the budget preparation format, okay? And the first thing we want you to think about is we want you to think about the budget calendar. You know, budgets start 6 months, 7 months before the fiscal year ends or the next one begins. And so, and for public schools in Michigan, the law lays out exactly the kinds of things you must do. And one of the things that you must do that you won't be doing is you must have a budget hearing, and that's for public schools.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yes.
So we have to fill out that paper with the principal?
No. Okay. And I'm glad you asked that question. So I realize that 4 of you don't work in a school. And so therefore, when I taught this last time, everybody was working in a school. And so they were actually doing a budget for their school. Okay. So what I've done is I gave you the documentation for a large, I mean, extraordinarily large, very classy Catholic school. I believe it's in Florida. I mean, when you see I can't remember their budget. It's like 20-some million dollars, which is, you know, and I mean, check out their webpage. I mean, it is a unbelievable Catholic school. And I was able to get their documentation on revenue, on student enrollment. And so I've offered that for you. And so you'll just put in here their enrollment, okay, for the past 2 years. So when you're working on a budget, even if it's your own personal budget, you want to have a historical view of what money you made and what money you've spent. And that helps you to decide what you're going to, how you're going to budget, okay? And so for schools, and Fatima already mentioned this, the larger the school, the more money they get in public education. And of course, with Catholic schools, the more tuition you're going to get. So therefore, enrollment is something you have to look at. And you look at the historical, and then you guess projected. So to explain this, I like to use interdistrict open enrollment because it was significant in my district. So the state came in with allowing parents and students to live in one district and be educated in another district. And when they did that, they took their state student allocation with them. Therefore, it was huge. When we first got started, we weren't sure how this was going to start to play out. And we've discovered, after looking at it historically, we were gaining 50 students per year through open enrollment. And so therefore, if I was just looking at interdistrict open enrollment students, historically, we had X here we had Y. Once again, we're seeing a 50 growth. So we're looking at probably, 50 more students here and 50 more students here. And the assumption is that we're going to continue an upward trend with enrollment, okay? And of course, the current enrollment. And also with that documentation from that school district in Florida is their staffing. And I think they had 200, I think their staff was around 200, if I remember correctly. So you'll just put that information in and you're going to see that their staffing didn't change dramatically. Their student enrollment didn't change dramatically. I almost wonder if they have a cap. And the same thing was true of their staffing. It didn't change dramatically. Okay, so that's the first three parts of the budget preparation. Okay, then we have to start to look at, and in putting together a budget, whether it's personal or for a school district, I strongly suggest you begin with the revenue. How much money are we receiving? Okay. And once again, looking at the past 2 years historically gives you a feeling for what's going to happen and what could be a recommended budget amount later. So what I've done is I've detailed this very carefully. I've done it by the codes. I don't think those are Michigan codes. I can't remember which. Those might be federal codes for all I think. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The codes are there. And so we always start with how much money did we carry over from the last budget? If we did, hopefully we did. If we didn't, then we got to make up money. We're operating at a deficit. And of course, school districts cannot operate at a deficit, so they have to have a balanced budget. Okay, so we look over that information and we put that down. Now, for this school district, you're not going to see any property tax. You're going to see tuition, and you're going to see user fees. You're going to see contributions. Can't remember what their contribution was, but it was impressive. And then you're going to see earnings on investments. So just so you know that when a school district, a public school district will receive their property tax at a certain time of the year, and they are starting to spend that property tax as they have salaries and pay salaries and the other kinds of things that they're spending on. And what schools do that have a good carryover and that have some money that they can invest, they put it into CDs and gain earnings on investments. So I can't remember if that was in theirs or not. Possibly was. Okay. Now, you don't have to worry about this. Okay. I'm interested in the general fund budget. Okay. And so don't worry about, but notice we have all those federal sources there. Okay. So now we get into the cost side of the budget. And we look at the total salaries, employee benefits, payroll taxes, insurance, that's property insurance, not necessarily health insurance, professional development, student transportation, and I included a couple of different utilities. A school might have natural gas, a school might have electricity, materials and supplies, textbooks, repairs and maintenance, and capital outlay. And once again, looking at those documents that you provided for the years that we gave you, put down the historical, give a guess as to assumptions, and on average across the country, year by year, school districts spend about 3% more each year with their salaries. Benefits have been crazy. They've been going up at 10% or plus because of the cost of health care. And so once again, we think about the assumptions. Here we're going to assume that the salaries are going to be the same from the other 2 years. And we then make a projection, or we see a 3% increase. So the assumption is if it increased 3% from here to here, chances are good that it's going to should be budgeted 3% higher. Health insurance is a little bit more tricky to budget because of the fluctuation. We've seen times when it's 15% more year over year. Okay. So now, in the meantime, there's about 5 different ways to do a budget. Okay. And you haven't gotten to that yet, right? You'll be getting into that in the next module, I believe. And so school districts typically use what's called an incremental budget. Incremental meaning that, just like I said, that the costs and the revenue increase about 3%. So therefore we budget 3%. Now the different line items might vary, okay? But that's one. The only other one that you might consider is zero-based budgeting. With zero-based budgeting, you start at 0 and you work your way up. So if you were putting together a grant application, you know how much money that you are want to receive or that they're offering, and so therefore you build your budget from 0, spending all the money that they offer in the allowable categories. Okay, so now we get into the actual budget process. So taking that figure from your recommended budget for unencumbered carryover, you take your recommended budget for revenue based on their information, their user fees. They have rentals, and it appears that their rentals go into the general fund. Some places it doesn't, but it appears that's the way. Their contributions and their earnings on investments and any other miscellaneous income. So you'll put that down, and then you get to the expense side, or excuse me. Yes, we get to the expense side. So here is the total of all of the revenue that we're getting unrestricted, okay? Then we start plugging in the recommended salaries, benefits, insurance, payroll, professional development, utility, et cetera, et cetera. And now we go to the total unrestricted general fund revenue, total here, minus the total here, and that gives us our ultimate carryover, okay? So once again, look at this as your own personal budget. We have X dollars that we receive, and we spend Y dollars. And there's a consistency probably with groceries. Maybe it'll go up and down some, but once again, if we for example, around Christmas time, we know our monthly budget is going to be busted probably because we were buying gifts and eating and things like that. So there is the document that you will put in. Okay, general questions. And once again, when you go through that module, you'll be more attuned. But my suggestion is look at those documents from that school district and try to get familiar with that document, because it will guide you, or it will be very helpful. Okay, questions on that?
I have a question.
Okay.
For example, if I work under Catholic school,
Yes.
so they they don't receive the federal sources or state sources. So I just put zero, right?
Yes, you can just leave it blank. I mean, you don't have to
Okay.
put zeros and all those numbers. Just leave it blank. I know that that means zero. And yes, I intentionally, uh, I don't want you to think about the federal sources. Uh, Although in a public school, you have to deal with those sources in expenses as well as otherwise. And in the meantime, well, as you're going to learn tonight, or you've already learned, they go into a certain accounting bucket that can't be mixed with other material or other monies, I should say. Other questions? So try not to get anxious about this project. The first thing is, I know you're learning, okay? So I don't expect it to be perfect, so, just work through it, do your best as you have been doing in the class, and you'll be fine, okay?
So for for the information for this project, we will go to the St. Pius Catholic School to find
Exactly. Yes, it is St. Pius X, I think is the name of the school. And yes, that's the documentation that is in that announcement. Start, mulling over that document, okay? And if you have questions about that document, shoot me an email and we'll sort it out for you, okay?
I think you provided all the document, but I think you missed one for the years ended June 30th, 2024. You provided it us, but I didn't see the for the year ended June 4th, 30th, 2023.
Okay, okay.
The salary, yeah.
So remember, in Florida, their fiscal year is different than Michigan's.
Oh.
Their fiscal year starts July 1. So their year ends June 30. So if my memory serves me correct, I think I gave you the documentation for fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23.
No.
Or 23 and 24.
Yeah, 23 and 24.
Yeah, 23 and 24.
Yeah.
So pretty current. I mean, they're right now they're in fiscal year going toward fiscal year 26. And so they're in fiscal year 25 right now. Okay. So you got some time with that, so don't get too anxious about that, okay? Okay. So let's get started with the review. I'm sorry, it looks like we're going to go a little bit later tonight, but it was important for me to get that information to you. So looking at the objectives now, and we're going back to the objectives with regard to grant writing. Briefly explain the grant writing process. And I think what I'm going to do is have Steve explain that one for us. He's probably been involved with some grant writing.
Well, there's a number of steps in the process. A key one really is the needs assessment. It's really important that when applying for a grant, as well as just whether or not the work that you're doing is serving the community that you're aiming to serve, is that the needs assessment is there. It shouldn't be just what we think should be provided to the community that we're serving, whether it's the school or the in a community center or any sort of setting like that. That's a key part of that. I'm not sure if you want me to list all the parts or just kind of highlight a couple of them.
Yeah, let's just talk about the first step is just the planning.
Yeah.
And figuring out what's the best application project that we can apply for. And oftentimes you might use a committee. Okay. Sometimes you don't, sometimes you do. It just kind of depends. And sometimes you're required to use a committee. And of course, that needs assessment is so critical because the reviewers will be looking to see what the need is and whether or not their grant will serve that need. So the better you have written about that need, the better off. And of course, then the writing of the grant. You get into the narrative, the objectives, the budget page, the how you're going to evaluate the work, and then there might be some additional material. Okay. So that's kind of the steps. Now, the grant proposal elements. Teresa, can you give me one of the elements in a grant?
I'm sorry to say somewhere I don't have 10 in my,
Okay.
I didn't copy 10, so I'm just looking for it on my computer at the moment. I
Okay.
apologize.
Can someone tell us one of those grant elements? And when I'm talking about elements, I'm saying the various parts of a grant. The first thing is you have the cover page. Typically, you have a cover page, okay? And then you're going to write a narrative, paragraph or two about what you are going to accomplish. Then the project description, once again, giving a little bit more detail, the needs assessment, specific goals. And once again, these are very important, that the goals match what the grantor is looking for. Because if they don't, then you're probably not going to be funded. Of course, the budget page, and we talked about a zero-based budget, and then how you're going to evaluate the success of the work that's done with these monies, okay? So cover page, narrative, project description, needs assessment, goals and objectives, budget page, and evaluation, okay? And I gave you some places to go to look for grants. And some of those are paid for. You have to pay to get material. Some were not. Grants Alert is one. eSchool News is another. Mimic Foundation and FundsNet. Those are some of the sources that you can use to locate. And I contend that probably the most challenging part in grant writing is finding the grants. Find a grant that you're interested in applying for. Once again, if you decide to do one, that's for bonus. Okay, now again, so we're making the shift from the revenue side of the equation to now the accounting side, which includes the expense side of the equation. Okay, so within accounting, tell me what's the basis? Why do schools do accounting? Why do businesses do accounting? Anybody? Well, the most important thing is it documents the revenue and the expenditures. So that's the most important.
Is that under fund accounting?
We're going to get into fund accounting, yes. That's the kind of, so I'm talking about just the overall practice of accounting, recording the revenue, recording the expenses, summarizing, interpreting the results for the fiscal information, and then ultimately the forecasting, budgeting, appropriating, and auditing. All those activities are included as far as accounting is concerned. When I got into a leadership position, I sure as heck didn't think I was going to be an accountant, and I'm not. Okay, once again, treasurers do the accounting work, but we as leaders have to be able to understand the accounting side of it, and we have to be able to interpret the records that we have for the district. And yes, school districts use fund accounting. Can you tell me fund accounting, Fatima? What is What is fund accounting?
Yeah, it's to execute accounting service districts employ fund accounting, and it's a system of managing the flow of revenue receipts and expenditures.
Yes, expenses. Yes.
And
So fund accounting is we put the revenue in certain buckets. And we're going to talk about those buckets here in a minute. And we have to have an idea about what those buckets are, so to speak, because in most places, those buckets are important, particularly for public schools. Now, whether or not the Catholic school is not obligated as much as the public school to use fund accounting. Steve, I'll ask you, in your experience, did the Catholic schools use fund accounting?
They did, but largely the three main funds that you would normally have, with public schools, the government, proprietary, and fiduciary, you don't really have the government piece. Or if it is, it's just where it's the largest piece in the case of the public schools, it's the smallest piece, if at all, in the Catholic schools.
Yes, exactly. And so that's fund accounting. And a fund is an account that's established by statute to assure the money is put in its proper place, that it's earmarked and spent with the proper purposes. And there are about three main revenue and expenditure fund accounts, and Steve was getting into those. The first one are called government funds. And within government funds, you have the general fund. And the general fund is the largest operating fund there is. And so all the revenue goes into all of the unrestricted revenue goes into the general fund. So in a public school, the property tax goes in there, the money from the state goes in there, but not the money from the federal government, because that's restricted funds. Okay. The next government fund is called spatial fund. And this is used for specific revenue sources. For an example, oftentimes athletic departments. So we don't want to commingle. And once again, we want to get this in our heads. This is an important concept. We don't want to commingle athletic ticket sales with the general fund. That's a no-no. So the establishment of a spatial revenue fund is where those funds go. Now, Carissa, I have a question for you. Obviously, you have an event coming up with your students, and
Yes,
do you sell tickets to this event?
we do. Yes.
Okay. And where does that money go?
Once it's turned in, as far as I know, it goes to the general fund.
Really?
Yes.
And it can, okay, in a private school.
Hmm.
I'm kind of surprised, a little bit surprised by that, because, the next year you have to have startup costs and you have to have those kinds of things. And so any of the proceeds, and you also have expenses that you're paying for. And so therefore, having that money in a special fund would be more appropriate. And that's the way it would be done in a public school for certain. You need to ask that question to your principal. And I'll be really curious to find out what she says about that, because, think about it. You guys go through all this work, bring in the funding, but yet it goes to the general population. I'm not sure that was fair, to be honest with you.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, I'm going to get a fight with you and your principal.
No.
Okay, so from there, another government fund is called the debt service fund. And this one's a little bit surprising because schools have debt. You say, schools have debt? How's this? Well, for an example, we were talking about the investments. So if you have an investments, monies are going to go into the debt service fund, and it's established for the payment of, and particularly long-term debt, principal and interest. If you're building a building, and you guys don't, I don't get you into this, but if you're building a building, then you would, and you pass a bond issue, and maybe you've been asked to pass a bond issue, those monies don't go into the general fund, they go into the debt service fund, that bucket, okay? And the last one is capital project fund. Now with capital project fund, the word capital means fixed assets, okay? So typically we're talking about the fund that is for the acquisition and construction of major capital projects or facilities or buildings, okay? So, but the one I want you to make sure that you really understand is the general fund. And the money that goes into the general fund from tuition is unrestricted. We can spend that money however we choose, okay?
Dr. Porn, can
Yes.
I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Could you tell me where I went wrong here? I put down government fund accounts, proprietary fund accounts, fiduciary fund accounts. How did I mess that up?
You didn't. You didn't.
Okay.
Those three big buckets are just that. Okay. What I just did was I went into the government fund bucket, and within the government fund bucket, there were about 4 other buckets inside there. One was the general fund. It better be a little bit larger bucket than the others. Okay.
I see. Thank you so much.
No worries. I'm glad you asked the question. And so, yes, the next general account is called proprietary fund accounts. And there are a couple of those accounts. Okay. The first one is the enterprise fund. Go ahead, Clarissa, you're nodding your head. Tell me what the enterprise fund is.
Yeah, so the enterprise fund has supplies, revenues from different things like food store operations or athletic programs inside of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the idea is it runs like a business. Now, we would like to think that and once again, I've learned a lot about the way Michigan does food service, and I find it interesting. But on average, so if you are involved in the National School Lunch Program, you're getting revenue, and that revenue is going to go not into the general fund. You can't use it in the general fund because it's restricted. It's restricted. Therefore, and so it goes into an enterprise fund. Also might be called the cafeteria fund or the food service fund. Okay. And
I have a question. So
yeah.
why does the proprietary fund say or internal service?
Okay.
Like it said, business activities classified as either enterprise or internal service.
Oh, yes. Yes. There are two within the proprietary fund. There are 2 buckets. Enterprise fund being one. And once again, the cafeteria is like a bit, you want the cafeteria to run like a business. Okay. And so the money goes into that account. Now, if that cafeteria fund is running in the red or losing money, the school administrator, the chief financial officer, can go to the general fund bucket and bring some money out and put it into the enterprise fund. So therefore, that's where that would go. The next one is the internal service fund. And the internal service fund is for income and expenses that are charged for goods and services to units within the school district. Okay. For example, if you had a central printing, that would be in that category. Okay? So now the third big bucket is fiduciary fund. The word fiduciary means that you are taking care of this money. And there are possibly two buckets of funds within fiduciary fund accounts. The first one is a trust fund. And within a trust fund, the school district is holding these monies for an individual, a private organization, or a government, meaning this. So let's just say that an individual bequeaths school districts $1 million out of their estate. In that estate, it very clearly states that the money may not be used for general purposes. Automatically, that money cannot be used for general fund expenses. What they might say is I want this bequeath to go to student scholarships, and I want the school to be able to decide who gets this money. So think about this. The person passes, their estate is settled, the school district receives the $1 million. They cannot put it in the general fund bucket. They can't put it in the proprietary budget because the person was very specific. And so the school district is managing that money for that individual. Okay? The second type of fiduciary is called agency fund. And this is when the school district acts as an agent for another organization. The example I like to use is, let's say that you are in a school district and you have a library, not in the school, but there's a small library, community library. There's a building and all of that. And that library doesn't have a big budget. And therefore, they don't hire anybody to manage their money. They hire the school, or they use the school district to manage their money. That money, fiduciary, the school district's taking care of that money for the library. Therefore, it would go into the agency fund. Once again, you sure as heck can't take that money and put it in the general fund. That would be a big no-no. Okay? So I think hopefully now you understand why you got these buckets. You have these buckets because the money you're getting, either restricted or unrestricted. And by the way, the Special Revenue Fund, Title I monies go into there. The federal funding goes into the Special Revenue Fund. And so there's a line for Title I. We apply for Title I, like you learned a few weeks ago. That money comes in. We now start to spend it, and it's kept separate from the general fund. Okay, so I want you to just have an idea that how the money is accounted for. It's not just all tossed together and accumulated such as that. Now, if a school district doesn't have any scholarships, then they don't have any fiduciary fund accounts. So they don't necessarily have each one of these accounts. Questions on the buckets. Okay. So next we get into GAAP. Okay. And I'm not going to get into details on GAAP. I'm just going to say to you, because quite frankly, I don't know the details on GAAP, so I sure can't tell you the details on GAAP. And it also means that you don't necessarily need to know the details of GAAP. However, the school treasurer must use GAAP procedures in their work. So it's a uniform way of counting. Okay, that's all you need to know. GAAP. The financial forecast. Now this is important. Okay, financial forecast. Who can tell me what a financial forecast is?
Oh my God. Is it a critical accounting function that describes the practice of predicting trends and charges on future district operations by examining actual history data?
Yes, we're projecting. Okay, and Ohio is one of the few school districts, few states that require school districts to complete 5-year forecasts. Michigan is a state that encourages it. They don't require it. But can you imagine how important that is in the overall operation of your school district? Think about once again, back to your own finances. You might not know exactly how much money you're going to be making 5 years from now. You probably could make a projection based on 3% each year growth or whatever your historical is. You make an assumption, you make a guess that it's going to continue that way. So the forecast becomes extraordinarily important for helping school districts clarify any issues that they might have come up, make decisions. It encourages dialogue and provides an idea about the fund balances. Okay, and so in Ohio, the school treasurer must put together a 5-year forecast. They kind of joke because they say, as soon as we build this forecast, it probably is going to not be accurate, which is probably true, but at least it gives you some ideas. And one of the things that that I did, and I had the school treasurer put together our budget and also put together our appropriation. So the school treasurer would come to me 3 or 4 months before the budget was completed, and she would say, Doc, are we going to buy any buses this year? I said, yeah, we're buying 1 bus this year, we're buying 2 buses next year, and we're buying 1 bus the following year, and we're going to keep that up because we need to restore our buses. What about textbooks? Yes, we go through a process. We're buying textbooks for language arts, then we buy them for math, then we buy them for social studies, we buy them for science. And that's the 4 years, okay? So you can kind of get the idea there. The next question that she would ask is, what about technology? Are we going to spend any big money on technology? And some years I said yes, and some years I said no. And then she would go back and build that into the budget. So working with the treasurer is extremely important, okay? So now we get into the actual codes or the chart of accounts. And once again, public schools, every state has a different coding system for public schools and public entities. And therefore, having an idea about those charts is somewhat important if you're especially going to be, because everything is on the code. The revenue comes with the code. In the specifics of the revenue, the expenses are coded. And I don't think you've gotten to the video that I put together about reading the appropriation measure, because for principals, extremely important to be able to reinterpret that those lines, the ones that you're responsible for. So, having an idea about reading those. And once again, we're getting into some of the weeds, so to speak. Okay. So now we're going to get into the budgeting processes. And I already mentioned incremental budget. And of course, the incremental budget, each line item goes up by a certain percentage. And that's what most schools use. Then there's zero-based budgets. And that is used primarily for grants, starting with zero and spending all the money. A third one that is often used is called site-based budgets. Can someone tell me what site-based budget is?
Survey budget is the budgetary process by allocating resources to a particular site.
Yes, to a particular site, and particularly a building. So here's the difficulty with a complete. So during my career, site-based budgeting became the hot ticket. Everybody said, "Oh, we got to make sure that the money gets to the building, and the building folk know how to spend the money on things that they need." There's only one drawback with this. You hire teachers. The teachers are on a salary schedule. Yes, that building might have 20 teachers. Yes, you could probably give them that money, but it's a heck of a lot easier to keep that centralized. The big thing to keep centralized is insurance. There's no way you could pay for health insurance on a site-based budget. Now, what we did at our school and what many schools do is there are certain things like equipment repair, like supplies and materials. We knew what the history was for that building. And so therefore, the treasurer built in and said, here's the amount of money that you have available for equipment repair. Now, and you have to manage that as the building principal. If you go, and you'll be watching those monthly appropriations, and you're seeing that, oh, geez, we had to have this piece of equipment repaired. We don't have any money in this line item. No worries. You can take money from general fund line items and move it to another line item. You can make those changes. So that's a good thing. And so we would give buildings based on their number of students, because their students were different. And so therefore, our K-8 building got twice as much money than our elementary schools because they had more students. And typically, she did that by students, X numbers of dollars, and gave that to the principal, who then decided how they were going to spend those kind of monies. I guess this is a good time for me to tell you that not one of the school districts use those three a lot. They use zero-based budgets when they're dealing with particularly federal funding. They use incremental budgeting for most of their budgeting, and they use site-based budgeting often to give buildings X number of dollars. Now, so those are the three most important ones. The performance-based budget is just that. It looks at the performance. And boy, this was a difficult one to actually use, and very few schools use it. The next one is planning, programming, budgeting, and evaluating. And this system was one that the government used 30 years ago. Boy, that helped us. The idea is if a program isn't working, then we're going to cut it. Yeah, well, we think we've seen with Doge that didn't happen. But anyway, so those are the different budgeting approaches. For your budget, you will say, and more than likely you're going to say incremental budget, and that's okay. You're going to tell me a little bit what that is. where you look at the previous historical operating budget and it projects to the recommended budget amount. Okay. I'm not going to go in too much detail with the school budget calendar. You aren't required to do that in real, but glance at Michigan's law because it is very specific about what takes place. And once again, the whole process can be between 6 months to 8 months before your fiscal year starts. So you got to get started quite soon. Okay. This is very important. The difference between a budget and an appropriation. A budget is the plan for our proposed revenue and our expenses. Appropriation, though, is with an appropriation. We can't spend money out of a budget. There's the bottom line. We can only spend money out of an appropriation. Now, I've been going through all this with you. In Ohio, treasurers do forecasting. So they're doing a 5-year look down the road. They do the appropriations. And quite frankly, they don't spend a lot of time on budgeting. I had a treasurer. I would always, in my face-to-face class teaching this, I would always have a treasurer come in and talk about her role so that everybody got a feel for what she was doing as we were starting to get into the accounting process. And when she told them this, they kind of looked, they went, really? She says, yeah, we don't do, I mean, it's kind of worthless, she says. So we don't do it. I said, oh, that's interesting. So when I came here and I was told you have to have a budget process, I kind of chuckled. But once again, it's extremely important for parochial schools, and parochial school principals. No question about that. Okay.
Can you repeat the
Yes,
budget
question.
again? Just about the budget. So like you're comparing the budget and what else you said?
So I think I'm understanding. There are 5 different ways you could do a budget. Okay. You could do it incrementally. And with incrementally, you're just moving it. You're looking at the 2-year historicals. You see that the salaries increased 3% in that year. Then you look at the current, and once again, it's 3%. So our assumption is that we're going to continue to be at 3%. We look at the last one, we multiply it by 1.03 because it's 103%. You follow me there? Okay. That will give you the recommended amount. Okay. So, I know this is all foreign to you. Let me just do a quick recap and tell you what the very important parts. Okay. The very important parts are these. I want you to know the elements of a budget, or excuse me, of a grant, just the elements, the needs assessment, the goals, budget page, etc. I want you to know the term accounting, know what that term means and what's done within the accounting, forecasting, budgeting, appropriating, and auditing. Okay. Understand fund accounting, putting the revenue in the proper bucket, spending the money out of the proper bucket. Okay. And those buckets have different funds. Okay. The government funds, The biggest one you've got to know is general fund. Proprietary funds, fiduciary funds. And understand each of the different budgeting approaches. Know the difference between the budget and an appropriation. With that information, you will be in good shape. Questions? Once again, if you have a question, don't hesitate to shoot me the question. I'll be sending you, like I've been doing, the YouTube video, which gives you a good chance to review everything. Okay. And Steve, I'd like for you to hang back for a minute. I'd like to talk to you for a moment. Okay. With that, good luck on the test. Make sure that you do that discussion by going to the discussion up at the top and getting to discussion 7 that way. Okay.
Doctor, when I read in the module, I saw one assignment. You said that upload it to you before the quiz.
Oh, okay.
Can you explain that one?
Yeah, that's not until next time. Okay. I think that's
not before this quiz.
No, it's not on this one. It's not on this one, I don't think. And I really have struggled with this one to know what to do. So what you're going to, and I need to check that, and I'll let you know if that is on the assignment or not. So what I was asking people to do is I want them to know what costs they have for their school district. Okay. And when students do this activity, they are astonished. The typical family insurance plan is costs the school district $20,000 to $25,000 per employee. That alone is unbelievable. Then you add the other kinds of things that the school district pays for, the payroll taxes, etc. Well, I said to myself, this is going to be a hard thing for you folks to do. And I can't remember let me look at that, and I'll send you guidance on it, okay? Because I know I realized that not all of you, one of you were in school, and so therefore only one of you could actually do that, probably. Steve could probably make up stuff, but so I'll look at that. I might even just cancel that. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that yet, but I'll look at it, see if it's on this quiz. If it is, I don't think it is. I think it's on the next one, but I did look at it and I gave it thought, and I think I even came up with an idea, but I know what I had to do. I know for one thing I had to do is Blackboard Ultra. With under Blackboard, you could upload something, okay? With Blackboard Ultra, they don't give me that option for you to upload anything. So I thought, well, how are they going to get this to me? And I thought, well, I'll just have them email it to me. So I know I've made that decision, but I can't remember if that's on this. I don't think it's on this one because we don't get into specific expenses until the next.
Oh yeah, I just see it, and it said in quiz 5.
Well, you're thinking ahead anyway, Anna. And I was thinking at least something. So with that, have a good evening.
Yeah.
Good luck on the quiz. I feel comfortable that you'll do fine. You got to study this stuff. This is stuff that probably just doesn't come natural to you, and we'll go from there. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good one.
My
Have a
friend.
good evening. Thank you.
Bye bye.